Welcome to the HarvestWorks live streaming event series. My name is Carol Parkinson, and I'm the director of our nonprofit Digital Media Arts Center in New York City. Our collaboration with Experimental Intermedia continues today with our fifth Zoom In OLAP, which is also known as our online live art performance community discussion forum. For this event, we have invited artist Ellen Perlman, Director of ThoughtWorks Arts and a research fellow at MIT, to share breakthrough network collaborations over the past decade, including the first ever IPv6 Summer Institute on Telematic Art, which happened in 2011. She will also cover her experiments in dance, biometrics, sonic environments, machine learning and AI, the Google Cloud, DIY artist networks, and methods of co-creative collaborations. Following a presentation by Ellen and a question and answer period from you, the audience, the forum will be open to anyone who would like to discuss online live art performance ideas or projects, as well as any technical or conceptual concerns. A bit about the artist. Ellen Perlman is a new media artist, curator, critic, and writer. In addition to being a research fellow at MIT and director of ThoughtWorks Arts, she is also a senior research assistant professor at Riseba University in Latvia, a Fulbright specialist in art, new media, and technology, and an artist in the 01 American Arts Incubator with the US State Department. She invented ArtaHack, a creative collaborative methodology, and runs rapid prototyping workshops around the world. Her new work, Language is Leaving Me, an Opera of the Skin, investigates AI, epigenetic memory, biometrics, and computer vision, and is being developed at MIT. The discussion forum will be led by Catherine Librovskaya of Experimental Intermedia. Catherine is an intermedia artist and curator who will now introduce the event. Thank you.
So welcome everyone to our fifth OLAP, and just a little bit about OLAP. So we've started in January, and we have an online community discussion forum with the different guests Sundays every 2 weeks. And for now, we will be continuing until mid-April. And after that, we'll see how it goes. If people will be willing to stay inside on a Sunday afternoon, listen to discussions. And so our usual format is that if anyone is new here, so we always have a guest who talks about their work, which we usually select because they have interesting approaches to live online performance. And so we've covered different aspects of live online performance, on music and performance arts. Ellen is specifically high-end new media, and so usually the guest usually speaks for about a half an hour. Then we have about a half an hour Q&A, and then anyone present in the group who would like to talk about anything related to live online performance can, either to announce something or ask about something or tech talk. And it's also very informal. So if ever we go on the whole 2 hours with Ellen because nobody else wanted to bring anything else up, that's totally fine too. So let's begin. Ellen.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much to Catherine and Carol for doing this very important series, which historically is really going to matter. And thank you to all of you, because I know 2 hours in the middle of a Sunday is a tough one to do a Zoom. I know that, so I'm very thrilled to, thank you for sharing your valuable time. I'm going to go into share screen now, and this will be a lot of visuals and a lot of sounds. So I want to go through some network experiments and bring you up to this past early fall in terms of actual network experiments and creative encounters. All right. So I know Sarah Weaver, who runs Now Net Arts, spoke previously. I don't know if it was, I think it was OLAP number 3. So I wanted to just show you one thing I worked on with Sarah in 2010, which is when we did something with Beijing, Korea, Canada, and the UN. And I'm just showing this because a lot of records of what we did don't exist anymore, but this was through IPv6, which is fiber optic research networks, and it was using compressed sound and uncompressed video. And so as far back as 2010, we were, working with network topology, and I was working in Canada at that time with network topology. So I'm just giving you a very quick overview of how this worked. Then what happened in my younger self is I went to Hong Kong for 2 summers, and Hong Kong Polytech University gave me a motion capture studio and all the technicians in the motion capture studio. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to data map 2 dancers and have their movements in Hong Kong change video effects in Canada, and also use live time music from New Zealand. So I'm going to show some of those early experiments in just a moment. But this was the idea of, the type of places that would change. So the basic thing, which you'll see is, if a person moved their arm like this and they were wearing sensors, it would change video effects 7,000 miles away. And this was in 2011 and 2010. Here is a little bit of the setup just before I show you what it was, which was, in Canada, we had a Jack Trip connection, a Skype connection at that time. We used VDMX for effects. The music was coming from New Zealand. There was C++ programming for the mocap, which was done in Beijing. And in Hong Kong, we had the mocap studio, some Skype accounts, some sound also, which were music choruses, dancers, and documentation and technical gatherings. So again, this was 2010, mostly 2010 and 2011. And this was over a combination of IPv6 and IPv4. So now I'm going to actually show this. It's a little wonky because the documentation was a little wonky, but it explains what we did.
Terror, tyranny, reign, destruction. The angel of death arises.
All those effects that you're seeing are being controlled by the dancer. We'll go into this.
Terror, tyranny, reign, destruction. The angel of death arises.
One, two, three, four.
It is your ride, it is your destiny, it is the time of things you cannot hide. It is the time of things you cannot control. It is the arrow, it is the smite, it is the tide of things you cannot hide. It is your destiny.
So that was followed after I did that in order to clean up the mocap data. I did a residency at Banff and really had to, with a programmer, clean up that mocap data in order to get the effects done more correctly for a video. I had to reprocess it. So some of what you saw was live and some of it I reprocessed. And for those of you who work in code, this will just show you a very simple max text file of how that was done, but it had to go through Python in order to be used by Max. It had to be retranslated from the mocap data. Again, this was in 2011, the retranslation. So things were not easy to do then. So moving along, I want to show a segment of this file, Nuclear Suite. and it's about the atomic bomb. And what I want to highlight is the performer will be moving in front of the camera. There will be video playing with sound. Her movement is translated into sound. You'll hear it. And then it is retranslated into a visual ghost in the image. And I will, in other words, movement translated to sound, retranslated to video. And I'm going to show you this, how that, I'll stop it at certain moments when you can see this. Okay, so this is an excerpt.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
And that sound is from her movement.
There it goes. The fourth atomic bomb has been successfully detonated. Here again is an excellent photographic portrayal.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoops. What you could see, I wanted to stop it then. Just, I stopped it the wrong way. What you can see is she's actually at this point playing with motion and the camera, and you could hear it go kaboom, boom. Okay, so let's do that again.
Here again is an excellent photographic portrayal of the boiling, foaming wall of water engulfing the ships in the foreground. This highly lethal spray was intensely radioactive.
Now, with this, I want you to see, that's her shadow. You see it? Now watch what is going to happen with sound retranslating to visuals. If I can do this. I'm going to go back because it's hard. Okay. If you look above the shadow in her head and watch what happens, see that kind of like black thing that came out with a face almost? You see it? Can you see it? That is sound. That's her motion going into the camera, becoming sound. The sound sent out off of the network and retranslated as an image. All this is over a network. All right, here it is again. That is not her shadow. That is the image. You see it? It's easier to see now. That is the image. In other words, she is in front of the camera. There's that in the background, and then it feeds back in as a sort of ghosty image. So that is a manipulation of the physicality into the lens, into the network, into sound, back into visuals, into projected. And you can see it right there. She's actually dancing with herself, a generated image of herself from sound through the camera.
Is usually severe.
There it is again, the image, that black sort of thing. That's not her shadow. That's the reimagining.
Radiation, however, is another source. Effect on the surface.
One last time I'll show it to you, and then we'll move on. But here, that, you see that? That's the, there it is again.
Another source. Effect on the surface may be significant.
Okay, so what that shows is how you can take live performance and reprocess the signals in a network capacity, so there is a fluidity between the sound, the optics, and the projected image. So that's what that was about. Okay. So now it's 10 years later, and one of the things I did was I created ABO, which means Artificial Intelligent Brainwave Opera. And I created a remote, what's called GPT-2 AI running in the Google Cloud, lifetime during a performance. So the idea for that was to create a sicko AI. The question asked was, can an AI be fascist? And what epigenetic memory is inherited traumatic memory. So can an AI have that? A character, Ava, wears an emotive brain-computer interface and a bodysuit of light on her body, which reflects 4 emotions. The opera is based on the biography of Ava von Braun's 14-year relationship with Adolf Hitler, because I wanted to create a sicko AI. I created a GPT-2 character, Abo, and what it was run from the Google Cloud Lifetime, and this is what I presented at Sarah's conference, now NetArts. I also wanted to know if an AI could produce fake emotions, and natural language processing toolkit was used. So for those of you who are more technically involved, GPT-2 has to run a virtual machine. Semantic analysis also has to take place in the cloud. The answers must be returned lifetime. The answers are routed through both visuals, video, and DMX lights. There was translation for the AI's text answers with audio software. The lag time needs to appear seamless, and the only thing that was fixed was the performer's libretto, Ava's libretto. Now, this was the basic setup. I am going to show it to you, but this was the basic setup, and I know it's hard to follow along, but the right-hand side, the brown circle is the performer's head, and little yellow marks are the brainwave headset. And the yellow squiggle is on the body, is the bodysuit of light. And that goes to data banks of audio and video. The performer's speech became text. The text went to a chatbot. That's the magenta Abo. It was up to the cloud, which is the pink, for semantic analysis. It fed back answer in speech. You're going to see all this, and also there were data banks of light and sound for the AI, and this all had to happen lifetime. And this is specifically for the GPT-2 in the cloud and how it worked. So the information had to go to the chatbot, Eva's speech, which is the very light yellow. It had to go and be converted to text. It had to be fed to the GPT-2 in the Google Cloud, which is green. At the same moment, the GPT-2 AI had to feed back an answer to Abo, which is magenta, and that answer had to go from text, which was projected, to actual speech. And then also the AI's answers had to be analyzed for sentiment, and that came up as a different colored background for positive sentiment, negative sentiment, and neutral sentiment. And this all sounds very intense, but I will show you excerpts from it. Building the character always gave random answers back, but the speech was always the same. Now, what really happened, which was shocking, is an hour before we were going to perform this, the cloud services got stuck, which I could not believe Google got stuck, but they did. And the only answer, and this I tell you was really true, that the AI would return was the word evil. So we kept sending, speech to the AI, like the libretto, and the AI kept going, evil, evil, evil. And we were like, this can't be real. And of course we had to reboot the whole servers, but that was unbelievable. So this is a very short 2.5-minute video that was put together by Vertigo Starts, and I'm just going to show it to you. So sorry about the stuff about Vertigo Starts.
I told everyone I would marry you.
Everyone I loved, they came to me.
ABO is a performance where the performer, Ava, wears a brain-computer interface, which is attached to a bodysuit of light on her body that shows 4 emotions: frustration, interest, excitement, and meditation. She does a spoken word libretto to an artificial intelligent entity, ABO, in the Google Cloud. ABO returns an answer, which is then analyzed for emotions of positive, negative, or neutral. And ABO shows those emotions through color and through trying to emulate what Ava is thinking. Ava's brainwaves also launch databanks of videos and a sonic environment.
You had an operation to remove a polyp on your vocal cords.
And what were you thinking, feeling, and doing?
I asked 2 questions. One is, can an AI be fascist? And the other is, can an AI have epigenetic or inherited traumatic memory? These are questions I'm asking in relation to both myself and my own memories, and to how artificial intelligence will integrate with humans trying to emulate their own indescribable emotions.
I only care about you.
But it is your job.
The benefits of the STARTS residency are certainly in arts practices research. I have created some high-level academic papers which are going to be presented at conferences in the next few months out of the research, especially on AI. The residency helps you develop your ideas further and your art practice further.
Of course, I've been wanting to ask you about my clothes.
The next steps are for me to both present papers around the world on the artificial intelligence aspects, and also to now create smaller parts of the opera investigating computer vision in artificial intelligence. That's what I would like to do. So for those of you who are technically minded in terms of just a little bit the network setup for this, we had 3 different computers. The second computer took care of most of the AI cloud processing. It was dedicated to that. And yet its answers from the AI cloud processing, you could see sometimes there were like green lights in the background or red lights. They controlled the DMX lights. We had a third computer just for the media server, for the visuals, and for the sound cards. So it was a big setup that we had to do. And for those of you who want to geek out, This was the way specifically in the network that we ran the Google Cloud. In other words, we had to have an answer bot and a semantic analysis, which means an analysis of the emotions of the answer. So we were analyzing the fake emotions of a fake being in the cloud. And they would create both the speech you heard, that was live time from the AI, and that was also self-generated by the AI, and also the colors of the backgrounds, because that's all we could do was use lights. And so this is just for the AI, not the smart textile costume, not the brainwave interface, but just for the Google Cloud answers. You know, the answers had to be stored for a millisecond before they could be output, because it came straight off the server. You know, there was a lot we had to figure out with this. So why this is important in terms of networks is it's using or you can use Amazon Web Services, but we use Google Cloud because you can get 300 hours for free in the Google Cloud per person. So we thought, great. And you can work with cloud services for certain types of data lifetime, and use that to then come back into your creative output and do things with it. In the cloud can actually be used, and there are many different ways that can be done, but this is the way that I decided to do it. And this we all made up. This was a collaboration between the Estonian Academy of Art, the Estonian Academy of Music, and the Human Computer Interaction Lab at Tallinn University. That's how, you know, we had about a 1.5 year rollout for this. Now, the most recent project I've done is I did something called Dance-demic instead of Pandemic, which was done in collaboration with U.S. Alumni Ties, Fulbright, the Battery Dance Company, which many of you may or may not know, which has been around for decades in Lower Manhattan, and Electron, which is a sort of creative collaboration in Estonia. And we did something which was really shocking because of lockdown. We custom built a server in a closet at Battery Dance Company. In their dance studio, they had like a storage closet. So we custom built a server which would be stored there. We got something called Emotibits, which were developed by Sean Montgomery, a neuroscientist, which measure things like blood oxygen, heart rate, position, and put them on the dancers. We did an open call for participants, and participants ranged from San Francisco all the way to India in time zones, and they collaborated live time. And we did biometric data manipulated in visuals and audio through performance that was streamed through a server from New York to Estonia, where it was displayed and broadcast. The network in Estonia was only built in April 2020. So this was all pretty fast. And this is a little bit Battery Dance Festival and the program. And now I'm going to show you an excerpt from this. Okay.
In these dance-demic performances, dancers wear Emotibit sensor devices on their bodies, live broadcasting their heart rate, blood oxygen, muscle contractions, humidity, and other biometrics. The first performance by Razvan Stoya draws on language to describe the perceptual experience of otherness.
All the videos and audio are live time from our collaborators around the world. In the bottom right, you can see the actual performance, and you can see the biometrics, and then the words mesh together on the main screen.
The next presentation, performed by Hussein Simcoe, examines an individual's journey of finding mental strength and resilience in the face of adversity and chaos.
And those little flails coming out of the body are biometric color. Biometric. So what is going on there is this is for the geeks, what we created. And if you can see on the left, there's the Battery Dance Studio and the server in the studio and what we created there. In the center is the main workflow on the server. And we used OBS, we used Touch Designer, Pure Data, Ableton. We had to have local disks. At the bottom, you can see the Electron Arts platform, which is, you could also see the audience in that, but for this, we just wanted to show the visuals. And on the right, that's what you would see through the client viewers of the different teams, the remote hacker teams. So we had remote hackers working on this as you saw it. They were manipulating those visual environments. They were manipulating the sound across, 10 time zones, live time, as the performers were performing with the Emotibits on them. So again, that's using the network as the collaborative tool and the collaborative performative environment. With a custom built solution. The last thing I'm going to show is just a very short shout out to New York and to Sarah. And this was part of, as HarvestWorks was part of, something put together this summer, this fall, the grid. Dealing with issues of the network and artists.
I've really been thinking through this whole isolation and lockdown thing. And so the postmodern condition emerged alongside an increasing concentration of power in the hands of those who control information, the economic system, and knowledge production itself. And some of what we've shown has been our creative response to this, especially in New York. We have created our own platforms that circumvent this entire structure. During the pandemic, larger organizations and institutions shut down and they laid off almost all of their staff. So we did not have cultural support in large institutions. When we did our Dancedemic Art Hack, we worked with Electron in Estonia, and the Estonian government had funded that platform. And that was because the people in Estonia found that Facebook and YouTube were cutting off their content for copyright violations, even if it was the performer's own piece. And they said, let's make our own platform from the ground up. And so now this platform exists and nobody can get their hands on it except Electron letting people get their hands on it. So they've jumped over Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, everybody, as has Culture Hub and has what Sarah has done. So
okay, so I can stop sharing the screen. Okay, so the reason I wanted to add that is because that brings us to where we are now in a way, which is how to work with the network moving forward. And, you know, personally, I feel that the stranglehold, we are using Zoom and it's a good tool for what we're doing. But, you know, I'm not so sure that we're going to be able to do what we need to do as creative practitioners with the currently available tools. So, you know, part of what I wanted to say is that I'm really interested in other ways of moving forward. And I want to open it up to you guys, you know.
Ellen, could you put a link to the Electron server in the?
Well, I can put in a link to Electron. So yes, I can do that. Let me take a look. I'll Google it as we're talking.
Okay. So yeah, I guess we can open up to questions or comments.
I actually had a comment. I think it is really a large part an issue of money. I can't, you know, the support that you demonstrated in those presentations seemed to be really enormous. I mean, something, you know, that probably HarvestWorks, you know, as a small arts organization, community based in New York City, would have to partner with some pretty deep pockets in order to be involved in something like that. I mean, in 2001, we did work with Rensselaer Polytech and NYU to do that Internet 2 performance, The Technophobe and the Madman, but that was supported by $27,000 from the New York State Council on the Arts.
Yeah.
And that money doesn't seem to be readily available. I mean, I understand that it's probably a matter of time before the technology gets cheap enough and before it can be more accessible to the general community. And I do understand that what you're doing is really groundbreaking and shows what the future could look like. But do you have any sense of looking at the capacity of normal people?
Sure. Well, first off, there wasn't as much money in there as you think there was. I can really tell you that. It was a combination of partnering, a combination of resource sharing, a combination of very small grants, I would say and a combination of donated skills and time. In other words, what we did have is, let's go back to the first ones in 2010, 2011. That was a donated mocap studio and donated engineers. Okay. That was also a donated residency. You know, these are things that were donated and was not monies actually given. There was like, I'm just going back to 2010. Okay. Then moving forward, you know, I was in a place where there was a lab, a telematic lab in Calgary, where I could do these things because the equipment was there as part of the lab. Then moving forward again, with what happened in Estonia with EBO, that was a small Vertigo Starts grant, and I do mean small. And the Estonian Academy of Art, Music, this is before electronic, and the Human Computer Interaction Lab donated space and and a very small fee was paid, and I do mean, I'm talking 300 euro was paid to the coders. And moving forward to Dance Demic, Battery Dance donated the space. Harvest ThoughtWorks loaned the server. People donated the programming time. So I know what it seems like from the outside, but I can tell you at no point was more than $10,000 used for any of this. In terms of hard cash, it was all done with in-kind services and donated services.
Do you, I understand that, but your partners have a lot of resources
Yes.
that they can donate.
Yes.
What do you think about, do you think it ever would be a possibility that a separate entity could be created that, so we could do these kinds of things on a more ongoing basis?
Well, yeah, I mean, Carol, I have found that in New York, there is a certain kind of hierarchy of what's important. And right now it's AR, VR, and MR or XR. That's the first thing. The second is, Sarah is the person in New York who has the most access to networks, I would say, of anyone, although there are some other people who have access. And so it's a question of, bending the arm of resource holders to get them to cooperate. And I have in New York a very mixed feeling about the institutions that have these resources and are not cooperating. And I don't want to go into who, what, where, when, and how. That's not productive. But there is in New York great resources, and the institutions, for the most part, that have them have more or less siloed them.
Right, sure.
So that's why you don't see these projects taking place in New York for the most part, except for the last one. And that's what I can say.
Oh, I understand. I'm with you.
But I want to maybe just shift a little bit that getting back to what Ellen said is like working with the network as a collaborator, but actually seeing everything Ellen presented. I mean, Ellen's ideas and concepts also happen to be complex, where she wants to, where her idea, they want to send sound and it transforms into video, and all of this is like even bandwidth intensive. But one could imagine that, somebody who's like more like a programming artist, and for example, Ellen mentioned, and I'm putting that in our list of resources, that Google Cloud is free, that someone who's a programming artist can do a whole project using the network as a collaborator with Google Cloud.
Yeah, I do want to say, Catherine, about that. I had an actual software developer for 10 months donate their time, a few hours each week. That was a donated time to develop that in Google Cloud.
Yes, and I understand, but someone who is themselves like a developer and an artist could, work out something with Google Cloud and a whole project that they would present on the web too. So, for example, you're doing projects where you need people specialized in sound, specialized in video, specialized. Some people have projects which are much more simple than that, and that they could do themselves, and there are resources there that could, if the projects are simpler. Not everybody's ideas are as complex, or some ideas are more complex theoretically than concretely or something.
Yeah, and I just want to say something to everyone. When I go to events or presentations or whatever, let's say wherever, I will, and I have walked up to people who are in a position of holding the resources after a talk or a presentation, and I have said, why don't you blah, 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 blah with us, with me, with this? I am not shy if I am in the same room, it's harder on Zoom, to discussing this kind of stuff with the resource kings.
But maybe if there was not only Ellen, but there was a group of 5 or so people who needed the same infrastructure to do different pieces. Is that, I mean, that's what I would like to see. And the pitch becomes, you know, of course, access for more than one artist. And then sometimes it gets into the content. Does the content have to be accepted by the person who is giving their in-kind donation of programming, you know? So it gets a little complicated.
Yeah, and wait, Carol, I want to share something about that everyone's going to find very heartening. I just want to share that, and I'm not going to name names, but at a certain point, I was begging years ago for access to an IPv6 network, and I was told by one very large institution that had this network that I was free to come there and use it if I would be willing to sleep on the floor. And I was told I could sleep on the floor to have access to this environment. I was said, oh, they said, yeah, you can come in on the weekend. You know, it was some hours outside of New York. And you can have access, and you can just, you know, wash your face in the sink and you can sleep on the floor. And that's what I was offered.
Plus, without any accompanying resources to help you manage it.
No tech, no resources, just come in, we'll open the lab, you sleep on the floor, it's your problem.
No, I know, it's awful.
But I'm saying that's the environment response that I received from some large resource holders.
But I think the question of looking at systems, parallel systems that may be beyond Zoom, but not at the level of, I know there's OBS, but not at the level of the motion capture studio. I mean, maybe there's a middle ground where some combination can be put together so that more exploration and more pieces could be tried.
I would say,
isn't that a little bit what ThoughtWorks does? ThoughtWorks does? No.
ThoughtWorks is a software development company. They don't have the resources. They don't have a mocap studio. They send software developers onto bank sites and do projects. I mean, that's what they do. The people who have the mocap studio in New York, I think we know who they are. Or if you don't, I won't say now, but you know, there are, let's just say, large university and now 1 or 2 nonprofits who have these resources here. I don't know about for the rest of you where you are, what you have access to. It's a problem, and each situation, if you look, none of these are permanent. They come together and they dissolve. Nobody is ongoing with any of these projects. No one. The only ones are Electron exists and they will work with partners, but then it's a one-off with them.
I was looking at Electra. Is it Electron?
Electron.
And did they do the series with, they do an ongoing series, don't they? Electron?
They do a lot of things, yeah.
Electron. And they're from Latvia?
Estonia.
Estonia.
And the thing to know about Estonia is only 1.2 million people in the entire country, and they're the most country in the world. Who knew, right? You can set up an e-business in like 3 hours there. So their government, they're right across the bay from like Finland.
Yeah,
their
Finland.
government has really gone all in on it, and it's a tiny government. It's the size of, right, and e-citizenship. You're right. It's although that's a complex thing. They're the size of my thumbnail, not my pinky nail. In terms of countries.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, that whole area, because Finland was the first to develop cellular telephony.
Yeah, and there is a strong, what I would call, Baltic Nordic alliance, because they look at each other across the bay, But it's catch as catch can. I would do backflips if it existed. I'm not finding any institution who's so devoted to it.
And what would you need to recreate a new piece? I mean, I guess you did with the Battery Dance Company. How did that come about?
Okay, well, what happened is I have to go back a little bit, but I'm a Fulbright specialist, and so Fulbright 2 years ago decided to have a convocation of their artists. They have artists and creative people, and figure out projects, and I applied and was accepted. And when I was there was 3 days of discussions. And I happened to meet Jonathan Hollander from Battery Dance, who I knew about but had never met. And Jonathan has gone to over 70 countries with dance for cultural diplomacy. So we put together a project on immigration, and it was accepted because both the dancers you saw in Dance Demic, one is a Iraqi Kurd refugee and the other is from Romania. And it was accepted, and then COVID hit. And I thought, okay, we're not going to do this. I mean, forget it. And they give a small amount of money. I was not paid for that, but the dancers were paid. I was not paid, just so you know. And Jonathan was not paid. And we thought, we're either going to transition this or it's going to go nowhere. So in 3 months, we transitioned it to a server. We borrowed a server from ThoughtWorks. And we worked with maybe one ThoughtWorks programmer, and we worked with Electron for sure. And we set up an actual machine in a closet and configured it, and got and part of the grant from the State Department allowed us to buy a camera and a network router. And the grant from the State Department was quite small, but it allowed us to purchase that equipment. The only people who were paid, and also to buy the Emotibits, the physical Emotibits. And the only people who were paid were the Emotibit person and the 2 dancers. That was it. And everything else was for equipment, and it was limited, and that's how it happened.
And were the dancers on site?
They were in the studio, and no one was there. What happened is the person went into the studio with a mask. This was during the real bad part of the pandemic, in the spring and early summer. Went in alone, set up the server, connected it, left. Then each dancer would come in, and all they had to do, the dancers only had to do 2 things. They had to make sure the Emotibits were charged and put them on, and they had to press on for the camera. And that was it. It was all self-running. And then they had to press off for the camera and recharge the Emotibit.
Wow.
No one else ever walked in the site, ever.
But they had to get visas to come.
No, they lived here.
Oh, I see.
They lived here. But the collaborators ranged all the way from the open call from San Francisco, Toronto, Florida, New York, London, Estonia, Kiev, Ukraine, and India. And they would all come in lifetime for meetings over 2 weeks, and we developed the software.
And they were primarily audio. Were those
all those
collaborators?
visuals. It was audio and visuals. We had
I see.
both the audio and visuals were done by the people from the open call lifetime.
So you're using Google Live as sort of a platform, where a telematic platform.
We didn't use Google for that. We built our own. Let me go back to screen share for just a minute, if that's okay. Let me just pull up the actual,
I think
Okay.
it would be interesting to identify how you made that communication, that telematic communication work.
okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
Let's just see if, okay.
But
This
I-
was not done over IPv6. This was done over IPv4, normal internet. So what we did, if you look at the middle one, and again, I'm not a network engineer, I had to work with all the teams, but we had someone working with the network. But now, if you notice right in the center of this, okay. In the center of the big one, there's a tan on top of the blue. It says whatever code environment Artahacker chooses, Pure Data, Ableton, etc. You see that? Then that goes to OBS, Open Broadcast. That would, Pure Data would go into that, or Touch Design or Ableton. If you notice there, it says local disk at the bottom.
Yeah.
So that was in the closet, the local disk. Then what we gathered from all of this would go through OBS, and then if you look down to green, to the Electron live stream. And so we would be in contact and streaming it off of Electron's server.
Right.
Okay.
And this is regular internet.
Yes.
Regular speed.
Although I will tell you that
Files.
we were fortunate when we first pivoted in May, and now realize Electron developed this platform in April. By May, we were already collaborating with them. They developed their software and their platform with us, even though they were already using it for this performance. So we were able to get them to develop this. Also, the Emotibits, we had enough lead time that Sean Montgomery wrote certain OSC protocols for us in the software. So all of this was designed understanding that this would happen. The entire cost for that was $2,000 for the actual development between Emotibit and Electron. And of course, we had to, we didn't buy the local disk. We had to buy the camera and the wireless router. At the same time, Battery Dance had to upgrade their internet. They couldn't get FiOS for a number of reasons, one being they were in a historical building, and that in New York is a nightmare. But they did upgrade their server just for us, and now it's more upgraded for them, but so we did not contribute to that cost. So, if you look over on the left, the orange side, it says Battery Dance Network Closet. You see that? So it shows, how this is all flowing. It was very complicated. And I couldn't do it. I mean, I worked with people who did, but, I'm not going to do that. But, it worked out, and we would meet with Electron. We would meet with the Battery Dance's network. They have their own network people, like I'm sure you have, Carol, your own network person, to create this collaborative environment.
And this was basically you and Jonathan sitting down at the table and saying, I wish.
No, well, and Andy at ThoughtWorks.
Oh,
But
Andy.
yeah, because yeah, right. That's what it was. And then we realized that, March 16th was lockdown, right?
Uh-huh.
And that's when we had to pivot. From March to July, we had to pivot.
Amazing.
So with very little money.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
That Carol, I want to emphasize that, Carol, with very little money. Okay, so I in HarvestWorks, I don't know, or experimental intermedia, I don't know what your capabilities are, but conceivably, especially if you have FiOS, you could have a dedicated server in there. And in fact, I'm talking to some people in California, and they are changing their entire network capabilities in San Francisco, some people, and we are hopefully going to do something with them in the summer maybe, or in the fall, and they are building out their network, which would be the Battery Dance Network Closet, based off a model of what we did, because they have their own network person. It'll be different, but so what you need is a dedicated server, a few bits of equipment, and you could run your own server for this.
When you say server, you're talking about the OBS Open Broadcast software. Are you talking about an OBS
No,
computer?
I'm talking about you bring in, they're not making iMacs anymore, but you bring in an iMac and you set it up and you configure it using OBS.
Oh yeah, we have plenty of those.
Yeah, so and if you have FiOS.
Yes, I got FiOS.
You could do it.
Yes,
with
I'd like
the
to do
right
this.
help.
We should
What?
do this. I would like to do this.
Well, then we can discuss this. Right now, this isn't the moment or the time, and I certainly can't configure this myself. But
what we don't have is the Electron Arts platform environment. That's what we don't have.
Well, you can, I would say, at least be in discussion with them. I don't think they're going to give it to you, but you could collaborate with them. They're already collaborating.
I would actually be very interested in getting in touch with them. I've seen a couple of their shows. I watch their Facebook and Twitter, Twitch. So yeah, I'll get in touch with you about that too.
Yeah, but so that's one solution-ish. But there are other people besides Electron. There are other things that can be done. They're not the only ones, although they were the ones I used because I had developed my previous Brain Opera, the AI Brain Opera. I had developed it in Estonia with some of their people, so I knew them. That's how that happened.
Carol?
Yes.
See if anyone else has any questions about any other aspect.
Yeah, let me wait. How do I stop the share? Okay.
Well, actually, I have one question because you keep bringing up ThoughtWorks, and people don't know about it, and it would be great if you talked about ThoughtWorks a little bit.
Well, sure. Let me just get back to Zoom. In 2013, I went to a workshop for, I don't know if most of you know what volumetric filmmaking is, or RGBD toolkit. Volumetric filmmaking is basically filmmaking with depth point clouds. You've seen it, that kind of like sort of
augmented filmmaking.
Huh?
Augmented filmmaking.
Well, no, volumetric. It's voxels. It's not augmented. It's volumetric. And it just was coming into existence, being developed by James George and Alexander Porter. And James George was in New York at the time. And they held a workshop on it at iBeam. And I went to the workshop, and it was really, this is coming into ThoughtWorks, hard because they gave a 6-hour workshop and then they left, and there were no manuals and no one knew how to use it. And, I am the idiot when it comes to software, trust me. And I thought, what the hell am I going to do? I have no idea how this works. There's no manual. And they just went, this is how it works, bye. So I asked Culture Hub if I could use their space for 4 hours on a Sunday, and over almost a year, people would, come in, and we would all try to figure out how to use the software because nobody knew how to use it. And Andy McWilliams, who is a full-time developer at ThoughtWorks, came in. And ThoughtWorks is a global, you might think of it as Accenture, but it's different because it's where developers go to get the development developed. It's more to the trade. And they're a global software consultancy they now have 8,000 employees in 46 offices in 23 countries or something. It's like amazing. And they were started by a guy, Roy Singham, with a social justice mission. And then 2 years ago, Roy sold it for a gazillion dollars so he could go and do his social justice work. So now it's owned by a global flipper of something or other. But anyway, you know, Andy and I started working together, and then one thing led to another, and we just kept going and going and going with software and art. Because one of the things is, because they're consultants, what happens is they have downtime between projects. You know, you get sent out on site and you do billable hours. And so the downtime, you know, they're just sitting there for a month or two with nothing to do. So that's who we source for some of the development of these people who are just sitting there with nothing to do. And Andy, being a full-time employee, is the person who can coordinate that, because I'm not an employee of them. And so I don't have access to that. So that's kind of how that works, you know, and that's how, and because they have a social justice mission and they run a hardware hack lab and they will sponsor Art Hack, you know, we're lucky that they're unlike any of the other big 5 tech companies who pay lip service to social justice, but don't really. And also they won the ThoughtWorks for the past 3 years has won the Anita Borg Institute Prize, and the Grace Hopper, and also the Grace Hopper Award for women in software. They employ more women in software than any other company, among others. I mean, so they have a real strong mission with that. And so we grab people who are kind of in between projects, and then they leave.
Wow. So they donate their time.
Yeah, and you know what? They'll come in for a few weeks and then they'll disappear. You know, and then someone else will come in or not. You know, so it's catch as catch can with them, because their billable hours, I don't know how much they get paid, but you better believe it's like high. I mean, you know, the company gets paid.
Sure. Is anyone else from our...
Yeah, there's a question.
Okay.
From Keiko. Did you see that, Ellen?
Yeah, I won't turn my video on. It keeps losing. I've been wondering if you ever thought about the trickiness of applying emotion AI to let it interpret human emotions. Yeah, that's the theme of my next work, actually, about that specific issue. I have tremendous concern about it, because I understand how taxonomy works, emotional taxonomy and sentiment analysis, after building ABO. And I understand how neural nets work. I mean, I can't do them, but I understand how they're configuring things. And so the project I'm going to work on using epigenetic memory, the reason I'm choosing that is because it's a non-verbal trauma, and people can't talk about things, and they can't even figure it out. It's all mushy and vague and gaseous, or as is any trauma of a diasporic people. And so as AI is going to be used more and more to codify everything, how are you going to work with systems that are codifying you that can't even figure out what is really inside of you, but they're going to be used to let you get jobs and insurance benefits and, you know, God knows what else. So the debate on it is something I'm very active in, and I'm very concerned about. And in fact, I've been talking to, I gave a keynote at the Nordic wing of the Human Computer Interaction Society, people who design systems. And my keynote was, I built a sicko AI and so can you. You know, In other words, if someone like me, who basically is horrible at programming and has to work with programmers and is not a computer scientist, if I can build a perverted system, let's think about what this means. So, I agree with you, Keiko, completely, and that's an overwhelming concern of mine, and it's now the focus of all my work for the next 3 years is specifically that. But I'm applying it not just to speech, but I'm going to be applying it to computer vision.
Thank you for that. I hope I keep losing actually audio too. So even though I turned off everything, hopefully it's gonna go okay. But sounds really great. Your next 3 years, yeah, the planning of it, because that's my huge concern too. I have been thinking more and more, not just like the very superficial level of Google or Amazon suggesting you and keep feeding you the news, which just because you just click Trump followers article and you get fed with all related very right-wing articles, for instance. But even it can go deeper, and it's in progress, and corporations really eye on it. And Google is one of the top company. So that's why when you are embracing the technology available for artistic project, which we can also use, that's great. But at the same time, it still makes me thinking about this this big side of what's happening. So,
well, Keiko, it's gotten worse, and why it's gotten worse is what I used was something called GPT-2, which was created by OpenAI. GPT-3 has now come out, and it's not been released for artists to use or the general public because it's so powerful, but I can tell you some of the things that GPT-3 will be doing. If I say the word sunshine, I say the word, there are already many softwares, technologies, GANs that can bring me back instantly images of sunshine, instantly. And so I'll go sunshine on a partially cloudy day with a rising moon. And all of a sudden, in 2 seconds, an image shows up of that. Where those images are being taken from, just like, the kind of sorting, is a problem that is so vast that it's overwhelming. And that it really is, so it's a problem of speech, and it's also a problem of image recognition, and it's a problem of networks, and it's a problem of neural nets, all at the same time. And that's really what I'll be focusing on very strongly. I don't have any funding for what I'm focusing on yet, but I'm not going to stop, because I understand exactly what you're saying. And I understand it just like you do, just how fearsome it is. And I think what artists can do is, instead of being afraid or overwhelmed, they can create and be proactive on it. I mean, not all artists, but that's my concern. Bitcoin is not the real issue, although everyone thinks it is. It's really not. It's the symptom.
But probably, Ellen, and like this vast all these images, that probably also images stolen by Google and everyone from everything.
You know what the real problem is, Catherine, is not the stolen images of Google. it's the problem of digitization and cultures of representation and entire cultures of people who were never digitized. In other words, we just had a ThoughtWorks Arts resident from Saudi Arabia, a Bedouin, I mean, she herself isn't a Bedouin, but, from Wahhabi Saudi Arabia. And she was she wanted to do a project with machine learning on the passing down of memory through generations. So she had to go back into her Bedouin past. And the earliest images of her tribe, quote unquote, which were Bedouins were nomadic between Iraq and Saudi Arabia and all that, was from British explorers. And before that, there was nothing. There was nothing written because it was an oral language, and there was nothing, painted really before that time. So her memory of her peoples didn't start until mid to late 1800s. Not only that, but the classifiers misclassified the Bedouin robes as weapons. Like, we went very deeply into the classification systems of these archival Bedouin images. So if you're making AI that's going to take words and translates them into images, and her background is being translated into terrorism from the mid 1800s about her peoples from the get-go, because that's how the computer recognition recognizes the imagery. What do you have going on? And I'll put in a link to her project. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff, not what Google does, but what Google doesn't have, and what people don't have, and what, all the stuff that we know that wasn't codified. Where's it going to go?
But even on a visual level, I don't know if you remember this, but there used to be something called visual search. And I used to love that. And it got taken off because it would put gorillas with Black people because visually it associated them. So that's
and that was the beginning. That was the beginning. That was Google. That was the beginning of visual recognition. I mean, that was you're absolutely right. And that was the earliest part of it. So you're right. That was, you're absolutely right. There's the link to Nuff's project.
There's a question for you.
The libretto was fed into the cloud and came back as evil. Did we ever figure out why I was saying? Yeah, well, directly no, but indirectly yes, because the ABO was built on 47 copyright-free texts. And those copyright-free texts were Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the movie script of Dracula, the movie script of Frankenstein, the text of Havelock Ellis's Sexual Perversions in Man, a book on eugenics. I'm trying to think of, Venus in Furs, The Space Zarathustra. I mean, that's the kind of stuff it was fed. So that's called, overfitting. In other words, it was fed too narrow a data set. And because it was fed too narrow a data set, it didn't have the full range of healthy human behavior. That was the point. I built a sicko AI, and so can you. So, but the fact that it only returned the word evil when it got stuck, we were just going like, this is a joke. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And then we had to call the real programmer who was in Singapore, and it was 2:00 in the morning. We had to wake him up and go, how do we reboot the Google Cloud? Because we didn't know. And then when it was rebooted, it returned answers.
Okay.
The server was possessed.
Yeah, or something. It was like it was like Poltergeist or something. Frank and Al, yeah. You know, Jed, about Frankenau, I want to give credit where credit is due, and my inspiration for knowing this could be done comes from the Columbia Digital Storytelling Lab and Lance Weiner, because they were holding meetups at Lincoln Center Film Society, and they were working on Frankenstein and AI Made by Many. And when I would go to those meetups, you know, they shared that they were working with this data scientist in California named Hunter Owens. And Hunter Owens had built a sort of Frankenstein AI. So, you know, I can read GitHub, but I can't actually do GitHub. So I went and looked at his GitHub, and I looked at it enough to go, you know, somebody could make this. So the fact that somebody had already made one made me know that somebody else could make one. You know, I wasn't going to write the code, but I knew it could be done. So yeah, I you know, it was just, you know, I was very inspired by Hunter Owens and Lance Wheeler's abilities.
Do we have any more questions to Ellen, or this is also the time where we can open up to anyone else who has any other questions, concerns, announcements, new software they've discovered out there that
I'm sorry it's so noisy over here.
yeah. Oh, actually someone says, does your MIT residency help you with your needs?
I would say it just started, and I think the biggest thing it's going to help me with, I mean, I'm being quite honest, is it's going to help me with validation to attract resources for the next project. I don't think MIT is going to give me very much. Honestly, I don't think so. They're going to talk over a few things with me, but I didn't realize how big they were.
Oh,
you know, I mean, I know they're big,
they're huge.
But you know, then I got like the full Monty of how big they are, and so I think in terms of resource, they're the best thing they're going to do is help me to the next step with resources I have to find on my own. I think that's the best way to put it, honestly.
But actually, speaking of MIT, something I wanted to say earlier when you were talking about some place that said, you know, you could go on weekends and sleep on the floor.
Yes.
But that's actually an old practice. I know that Phil, I think it was in the 70s, and I know it was somewhere in Boston and possibly MIT, but all the experimental musicians would go on weekends, sleep on the floor, and record at this super high-end audio studio. And they were told, if you want to come sleep on the floor and use the studio, you're welcome. And people,
yeah, I understand that, and that may be an option, but to you know, come in myself and use an entire IPv6 network system all by myself.
No.
I mean, you know,
No.
I can't. I just can't, and it's just, you know, not going to happen.
Can you get any of the students to participate with your projects?
At this point, I don't think that they want to. I think they, you know, and I think my chances, it's too early to tell, but I don't see that happening. I could be wrong. But it's not quite like that. I don't have a lot of exposure to the students because it's virtual. So I think if I could find a student, I would have to be there in physical presence, you know.
if it was not the pandemic, would your residency, they wouldn't put you up in Boston.
No, I would have to go up there and Airbnb it.
Right.
Yeah, they're not, it's not, believe me, they're not, there's no financial support. Let me put it bluntly. There's resource support.
Prestige of their name.
Right. There's resource support, and there's, I have an ID and I can have access to facilities and, libraries and stuff like that. But if anyone thinks it's financial, it's not. So, we're artists. We know where we are in the hierarchy and in the pecking order. We understand that very well. And that's what we get no matter what.
So do we have any other announcements or questions? Or no questions are too stupid if anyone doesn't know what something we talked about is and would like to ask about it?
I have kind of a more specific pragmatic question, I guess. The one piece where the dancer was dancing right in front of the camera and it was feeding back to the music, and the music was feeding back to the video. I was just wondering if you could give a little more information about how that was done in terms of, was it like, I was trying to kind of get a gist from the sound, and was it doing like granular processing of audio that already existed?
Yeah. Yes. Now remember, that was like in 2010.
Yeah.
It's been a while, but yes, it was using, you got it. It was using,
okay.
I remember the word granular processing. You're absolutely right.
And then to get the audio to convert back into the video, like I know you had mentioned about like the face showing up in the video, like, so was it taking the actual video of her and then filtering it via some parameters?
And then reconstructing it. Yes. And unfortunately, because it was 2010, I either lost or don't have the whole flow, the routing of that.
That was really cool. It was a really neat idea. And
it's something you could do if you understand granular processing. We did have an IPv6 network, which works with sound much better than visuals, but it went, there was some Max MSP and there was sound, granular synth. So you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, that was very cool. Thank you. I was curious. It's a shame. I wish you had more of the specific flow of it.
Well, you guys are mostly in audio and you understand the audio part better than I would. Mine is mostly visual and performative. So it's the insight of audio people like you that contributes to this.
Thanks. Do you know I don't know if you remember this part, because it was probably too, but when it was being manipulated by the video, was it using like the parameters of like how much light or proximity to the camera? Or
it was
do you
proximity,
know?
And it went through, I think it went through Isadora.
That I'm not familiar with.
Which is another software. Isadora was developed by Mark Coniglio, and it's around and it exists. And I think it went through Isadora, and then through Isadora, which mapped motion, it was sent out of Isadora to granular synthesis.
But Isadora was actually so by Mike Coniglio for Troika Ranch, but as far as I know, in any case, when they started, it measured like muscle.
No. Isadora was for theatrical performances and for scene shifting, basically. And now it's gone into a lot of Mark Coniglio has kept it up, and I have used it in other productions, and he's really just keeps developing it. In fact, it's probably something that I haven't looked at in the past 6 months, but I would suspect it's probably something that can be used for network performance now as well.
But yeah, it started with dance, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Dance and theater. I mean, its roots are in that, and it was developed in New York, and now he moved to Berlin. So when I said something about, in the New York thing, we just like do it, because we get treated so badly.
Thank you.
Trichotronics, I think it is.
Trichotronics.
Yeah, let me
Thanks.
see.
Can I ask something about music as well? The sound. About the video you show us with the male dancer dancing, and you were talking about chaos. Now here comes chaotic or something. And I recall the sound is keep going as really smooth and kind of groovy. Sound is still going, and it's for me it was quite far away from what I think about chaos. So I was just wondering, you know, when you are treating collaborating with.
Okay, Keiko, which piece was that again you're talking about?
You missed my my sound must have
No, I heard what you said, but I was looking at the Trichotronics link. So just please tell me which piece you meant of the pieces.
The dancer was, I remember, wearing whitish
okay
color and text going on around his body.
Okay, so that was the dance piece. Okay.
That's beautiful.
What was going on with that piece was there were two composers. One of them was in California and one of them was in Ukraine. And they were using pure data. And the visual designer was using Touch Designer. And so the visual designer worked with the manipulation of sound in pure data. And the manipulation of sound in pure data was coming from the biometrics. So the biometric information was being output. It was being caught by both the sound person in pure data, it was live, and then also the parameters were being caught by the Touch Designer person, and they were combined.
Where was the text? Where were the words coming from?
The words had been they were a combination of Romanian and it was Romanian because it was about being a immigrant, and so not understanding the language. So the words were already generated and they had been a bank of words. I can go back to that for a second. I'm just trying to, here it is. I'm gonna go back to it and share the screen and fast forward on it if that's okay with everyone.
In these,
sorry,
dance-gemic
I'm trying to make it go
performances,
fast.
dancers wear Emotibit sensor devices on their bodies, live broadcasting their heart rate, blood oxygen, muscle contractions, humidity, and other biometrics. The first performance by Razvan Stoya draws on language to describe the perceptual experience of otherness.
Now, the thing about this is, first off, in the bottom right, you can see him in the studio moving. That's what's really going on. In the lower left, you can see the words of a poem, which eventually come up in Romanian. And in the middle, you can actually see his lifetime biometrics. Okay, so if you watch as he's moving, the words move around him. That's part of the sound manipulation going on with, that's pure data and Touch Designer basically. I'm sorry, over the network. Okay, let's just look at this. Now watch how it responds to the shape of his body. In the next one, it moves also. See? So what that is that same background that the words were in, but it's ghosted out. And then his image is taken by Touch Designer and re-input in with a delay. And the sound is Derek manipulating and Yuri manipulating the sound live time with that data in the bottom, the emoji bit data. You see it? So
Oh, that's so beautiful.
and so what's happening here is it's just letters, and it's letters of some of the poem down there. And again, look in the very bottom, and you can see that the bottom right, you can see what's actually going on. And then the environment, that cloudy environment, is made by the Touch Designer person, and who also made the words, Vinay. And that, again, Derek and Yuri, live time, which means San Francisco and Kiev, Ukraine, and India are all working together with Estonia at this moment to broadcast that out from a dancer in New York. So that's what's going on here.
So beautiful.
Yeah, but you know, it was okay. This is stop stuff. Bye. Okay, so that's what I mean by it. It's the network ultimately was the instrument, although you had all these people, and they donated their time and their over a 2-week period. This was an open call, and people jumped in, and we're actually going to do, I suspect, there's going to be a strange open call this summer. I'm working on the details of it, and I won't know for another month what it's going to be, but there might be not this, but something else.
But I remember that open call, and I remember sending it to someone I know. I don't know if they applied.
Yeah, because you see, the reason we do an open call is because we don't want to, especially in a pandemic, negate people financially, although they have to have a decent network connection. And we don't want to negate people culturally, although unfortunately we have to do it in English. I mean, there's some parameters. But that way, when we opened it up to the whole world, we got Vinay, who did the visuals, knocked my socks off, and Yuri and Derek, and I didn't know them before.
But I think that nowadays, anyone who has the minimal technological expertise you would need for them to participate in something like that would know English, because English is the language of song.
Right. But you know what? Some of the people didn't have technology skills. There were 2 or 3. One was a project manager. One was a dramaturgist. So there were 2 or 3 people who had absolutely no technological skills. We always try to include that. And the dancers had no technological skills at all. So let me tell you, to train the dancers to work with that stuff and to work with their bodies with the tech, I mean, they had never seen it. So, we had at least 5 people who were technologically clueless.
You must have had some kind of monitoring system in the room so that the dancer could get some feedback on what they were doing. No? Wow.
No, what we would do is we would tape in rehearsals, we had a lot of rehearsals, we would tape it and they would play it back on their iPhone or Android phone, the session we had just done, and they would look. And so then they knew, oh, if I go like that, it does this. So we had to work with the dancers for a number of weeks. They couldn't see themselves live time.
No, but it's also a known fact that I know this like from doing some experimental documentary films, that if people can see themselves while, well, which what we do in Zoom, but oftentimes when people and so imagine if you're talking, you're just sitting there, but yeah, when performers can see themselves while they're performing, the performance is worse. So it's better if they can't be looking, because then they're dancing like.
You know what I want to say to everyone is that it's not as daunting as it looks. And what I mean by that is, again, I'm not a programmer. I can understand code when I look at it, but I can't write it. I can sort of understand it. I don't have a lot of money. I think it's collaboration, resource sharing, and also for me, it's geographical spatialization. You know, I mean, the amount of brilliance that's out there and that can be worked with over a network is exponentially that which is in your geographic area.
Yeah, actually, having heard your presentation, it does have a lot of these extremely complex elements, but what I really take back is that you have had projects where you had all of these elements from all around the world that you wanted to bring together, and you've researched and found ways to bring them together, and for each project. So it's like really that the glue kind of that made it possible to bring music from New Zealand and this from that. So yeah, the connection.
Yeah, it's great.
People
Bravo, I think.
Really. But, you know, it's great.
Wow, Ellen, you're amazing.
But
wow.
It's great to share it, because I can tell you that I feel, and this is very honest, oftentimes I'm punching wind, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you all know that.
And yeah, and I think if you were a guy, you would probably feel a bit less so. You'd be
yeah, that's true. You know, and I will say that I don't have much hope of being funded for the next thing I want to do in the United States. Honestly, I don't have any hope of it at all.
People, we're 5 minutes to 4.
I'm curious what your thoughts are.
No, 5 minutes to 5.
5 minutes to 5. Sorry, yeah. And,
do you have any musings on the future of natural language programming, natural language based programming for artists? But you don't have to answer that, but I love your work, and it really just, strikes a chord in me with, the telematic. I have telesoma.com, and I feel as if the future of, artist-run initiatives in this sort of networked ether will really need to be hammered down, because, I'm working with Wavefarm a lot and these types of organizations, and they come out of the Prometheus Radio low power broadcasting movement. So, these are just little seeds being thrown out there. Ideally, there's a network of labs that can facilitate these types of works. I remember, Carol, when you did your, when HarvestWorks had the 15-second delay between the coasts for one of the earlier live collaborations. We haven't come much further, but it's definitely become a lot more fascinating.
I remember doing.
I would totally be into joining a network to experiment with this kind of stuff.
What's Telesoma?
Telesoma.com. It's one of my student resource pages for their projects. I would ask them what they're interested in, and I would provide these links. And it's not updated, but I'll reach out to CU Boulder and perhaps the Studio for Creative Inquiry and sort of bounce some of these ideas around, because I'm at the point where the AI is getting interesting enough. As I mentioned in the chat, I just heard some Glossalia generated language, and that's my joy right there. So computers are going to be true Dada artists in the future. But right now we have to deal with the ethics of it because it's really unfortunate, you know, being all based in English. Like the Chinese people can't even write an OS that is stable. So the language component is the first barrier, and then the next barrier is these hard-baked, you know, as you mentioned, the taxonomy, the history of taxonomical thought, which is pretty unfortunate for Western culture at large, and the fact that we are progressing in that vein. But
Jed, where are you based?
I'm in Detroit, and I'm also in Brooklyn, and I make trips out to Colorado and the Bay Area. But yeah, I'm happy to provide any kind of donated research for your work because it'll help me quite a bit.
Okay, well, that's something, you know, we can take offline with
Great.
Carol.